Are some of the really big issues less settled than commonly claimed? I would say yes. I will quote Professor Jerry Pollack from his speech in Washington, D.C. earlier in 2011, when I remember very clearly him saying that his view was that we should go back 200 years in the majority of sciences. And that was a real shock to me. But the more I look at it, the more I think he's actually right. Many of our sciences are built on foundations that were established in the 19th century and before the knowledge of electricity had really taken hold. Electricity was only really invented, discovered, in around about 1850. But most of the sciences which we use today were very well established prior to that. And the foundations, as I say, were laid before the era of electricity. And that means that those foundations had to be based on what the knowledge was that was available at the time, which is fair enough. The problem is that inertia seems to have started creeping in already. And many of those sciences don't now incorporate electricity into their foundations and into their fundamental thinking, which means that in many ways they are limited by the explanations they can offer for current phenomena. And it means when new evidence comes along, they have to use anything but electricity because electricity isn't in the toolbox. It wasn't there at the beginning and it can't be added in later because it would undermine the existing paradigms. And that's the real problem. If you could introduce electricity without undermining the existing paradigm, then it wouldn't be a problem at all. But many of our sciences are built on extremely detailed models, often backed up with some very fantastic mathematics, which appears to demonstrate that it works okay without electricity, but it gets further and further from common sense in a number of different areas. So the electric universe obviously considers that the role of electricity in space is absolutely fundamental, and electricity plays an active role. So there's one example. But it does appear that this similar problem of the mainstream science missing a vital component does spread into a number of different areas. But one of the problems I think we've got nowadays is that most science tends to be highly specialized. There is simply so much information around that to become qualified and to earn a doctorate, for example, in any particular branch of science, you have to spend so long and become so specialized in that particular branch, you have absolutely no idea of what's going on outside it. There simply isn't time. It's hard enough to keep up with all the papers being published in your own discipline, let alone keep up with somebody else's as well. And so once again, working within the discipline, you tend to think that all the problems have been solved within the discipline, and you tend to borrow freely from other disciplines, not realizing that there are actually problems in those disciplines as well. And so the whole thing has a danger, so we say, of becoming a bit of a house of cards because the foundations aren't soundly built. And worse, when you start borrowing from other disciplines, assuming that things are sound in those disciplines, you may well find that you're borrowing from another house of cards to build your own house of cards another story higher. So it can be a bit of a problem.